Not every starship in the galaxy is a dream ride into the sunset. In fact, some of the most iconic ships in Star Wars would be absolute nightmares to retire in. You might think you'd love to spend your golden years cruising hyperspace, sipping caf in the cockpit, watching nebulas drift by. Except most of these ships weren't built for comfort. They were built for war, bounty hunting, scavenging, or ruling through fear. Here's the thing nobody talks about. The ships we love are almost always ships we love watching someone else suffer inside of. You're about to discover which iconic ships would actually make you miserable, stranded, or dead within a month of moving in. We're counting down from 10 to 1. And by the time we hit number 1, you'll be grateful for your boring apartment back on Earth. Let's get into it. Number 10. You saw this one coming. Everyone romanticizes the Falcon, and who wouldn't? Han Solo made this ship look like the coolest thing in the galaxy, but strip away the nostalgia for a second and ask yourself one serious question. Would you actually want to live here full time? The Millennium Falcon is essentially a studio apartment bolted onto an engine that breaks down every other Tuesday. The interior is cramped, cluttered, and perpetually in a state of half repair. That famous Dedrick table in the main hold? That's also your dining room, living room, and entertainment center, all in one circular booth that smells like Wookiee. The cockpit seats 4, but the rest of the ship offers a couple of narrow bunks, a tiny refresher station, and corridors packed with exposed wiring and maintenance panels you'll bang your shins on daily. Comfort is a generous 2 out of 10. Privacy is nearly non-existent unless you enjoy sleeping 3 meters from someone in a bunk barely wider than a coffin, failing at the worst possible moment. And reliability is the real killer. The Falcon's hyperdrive is practically a running joke across both canon and Legends. In Legends, the ship's original factory specs were so heavily modded that no standard repair facility in the galaxy could service it properly, meaning every breakdown becomes a custom job. The hidden upside is that the YT-1300 frame is one of the most modular freighter designs Corellian engineering ever produced. In Legends, owners modified them into everything from luxury yachts to mobile hospitals. The bones are good. Han's Falcon, however, is a Frankenstein mess held together by hope and Wookiee ingenuity. Living aboard the Falcon is like retiring into a classic muscle car you have to fix every weekend. Charming for a week, after that you're just cold, sore, and listening to something rattle behind the wall at 3 in the morning. You think a rattling freighter sounds rough? Wait until you see the military ship someone tried to turn into a family home. Number 9. Hera Syndulla made the Ghost feel like home for the Spectres, and that's a testament to her as a captain, not to the ship itself. The VCX-100 is a utilitarian cargo hauler that was never designed for long-term habitation by a full crew. Built by the Corellian Engineering Corporation as a transport and light combat freighter, the Ghost has decent cargo space, a nose turret, and the ability to dock the Phantom shuttle underneath. Sounds practical. In reality, you're sharing a ship roughly the size of a modest 2-bedroom house with 5 other people, a cantankerous astromech, and whatever cargo you're hauling that week. The crew cabins are military spec. Thin walls, narrow bunks, zero soundproofing. If Zeb is snoring 3 rooms over, you're hearing it. The common area is functional but sparse, and the galley is barely a kitchenette. Comfort hovers around a 3. Privacy is slightly better than the Falcon thanks to individual cabin doors, but those rooms are closer to closets than bedrooms. Safety is respectable with forward cannons and a solid hull, though the ship took enormous punishment during the rebellion. Reliability is the Ghost's strongest trait. The VCX-100 frame is known for durability. Here's a detail most fans miss. The VCX-100 was already considered an aging design by the Clone Wars, and by the Imperial era it was largely out of production with dwindling parts support. Hera was flying the galactic equivalent of a discontinued minivan she'd retrofitted with guns. Now imagine a ship with even less space, no crew quarters, and a holding cell where a bedroom should be. Number 8. Boba Fett's Slave One is one of the coolest looking ships in Star Wars. It's also one of the worst places a human being could choose to live. This ship wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed to hunt people down and lock them in a cage. The Firespray 31 is compact, aggressive, and oriented vertically during flight, meaning the interior layout rotates depending on whether you're flying or landed. Your floor becomes your wall. The living space is roughly a large walk-in closet, and a significant portion is dedicated to prisoner cells, weapons systems, and sensor arrays. There's a pilot seat, a small refresher, and not much else. Comfort is a genuine 1 out of 10. The engine noise reverberates through that compact hull like living inside a metal drum. Privacy is technically perfect because no sane person would live here with you. Safety is excellent. Seismic charges, concealed weapons, enough firepower to threaten ships 10 times its size. Deep lore. The Firespray 31 was originally a Republic prison transport, and Jango Fett stole the prototype from the Oasis Penal Facility in UVO 4, then destroyed every other Firespray to ensure his would be unique. Retiring on Slave 1 is like spending your final years in a weaponized phone booth. At least Slave 1 is climate controlled. The next ship will have you sweating through your robes in a mobile junkyard. Number 7. Picture this, you've decided to retire on Tatooine, and your housing option is a Jawa sandcrawler. Congratulations, you now live inside a mobile scrap heap that smells like burnt circuits, ion residue, and whatever Jawas smell like, which according to virtually every source is indescribably bad. The sandcrawler is enormous at roughly 36 meters tall, originally built as an ore hauler by Corellia Mining Corporation long before the Jawas repurposed them. The interior is a labyrinth of cargo bays, conveyor systems, scrap storage, and narrow corridors designed for being significantly shorter than the average human. You'll be hunching through doorways, stepping over droid parts, and navigating a layout that makes zero ergonomic sense for anyone over a meter tall. Comfort is abysmal. There's no climate control worth mentioning, and you're on Tatooine. The interior becomes an oven by midday and drops to freezing at night. The walls are bare Durasteel. The floors are coated in decades of grime. Privacy is non-existent because Jawas operate in massive clans, sometimes packing dozens into a single sandcrawler, and personal space is not a concept they value. Safety is alarmingly low, minimal shielding, no weapon systems to speak of, and they're slow enough that Tusken Raiders have been picking them off for centuries. In both canon and legends, Jawa sandcrawler interiors are described as having a smell so potent that other species experience nausea within minutes of stepping inside. You're not just living in a junkyard, you're living in a junkyard inside a gym locker, and somehow, there's no shower. But here's where the list gets genuinely dangerous. The next ship looks charming until you realize it's one hard landing from falling apart. Din Djarin's Razor Crest became a fan favorite the moment it appeared in The Mandalorian, and it's easy to see why. It has that rugged lived-in aesthetic Star Wars does better than any franchise. However, lived-in is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because what the Razor Crest actually offers is a pre-Imperial gunship that was already decades past its prime when Din was flying it. The ST-70 assault ship was originally a military patrol craft used during the final years of the Old Republic. By the time we see it, it's a relic. Patched hull, outdated systems, and a carbonite freezing chamber in the hold that doubles as prisoner transport. A significant chunk of your living space is literally a jail. The cockpit is cramped, the lower cargo hold is a bare metal box, and the sleeping arrangement appears to be a single narrow bunk Din barely fits in. Comfort sits at a 2, being generous. The ship has heating and life support, but creature comforts are 0. Privacy is decent only because it's a single occupant vessel. Add Grogu and a passenger or two and it evaporates. Safety is moderate with forward laser cannons, but the aging hull can't take sustained punishment, and we all saw what happened to its reliability in the end. Here's the detail that stings. In supplemental canon material, the ST-70 line was noted as out of production for decades, making replacement parts nearly impossible to source. Din wasn't maintaining a ship, he was performing life support on a dying patient. Retiring in the Razor Crest is like buying a 1970s RV off Craigslist, driving it into the desert and pretending the engine light isn't on. Now we're entering ships that could structurally kill you without anyone firing a shot. Number 5. The Nebulon B is one of the most recognizable capital ships in Star Wars, and also one of the most terrifying to actually think about living inside. You know the shape, 2 bulky sections connected by a thin exposed spar that looks like it could snap if you breathed on it too hard. That's not just an aesthetic concern, it's a structural one. Manufactured by Quat Drive Yards for the Imperial Navy as an escort and convoy defense vessel, the Rebel Alliance captured dozens and repurposed them as medical frigates and command ships. The forward section houses the bridge and crew quarters, while the aft section contains the engines and main reactor. Everything between them, that long, narrow connecting spar, carries critical power conduits, data lines, and access corridors. If that spar takes a direct hit, the ship splits in two. This isn't hypothetical, it happened repeatedly in both canon and Legends engagements. Comfort averages around a 4, especially on the medical frigate variants where patient recovery areas are reasonably well appointed. Privacy is moderate, roughly equivalent to a naval vessel. Safety is where the Nebulon B falls apart, literally. The ship carries turbo laser batteries and can hold its own in a fight, but that connecting spar is a catastrophic vulnerability any competent gunner would target. In Legends, the design flaw is so well known that Imperial tacticians specifically trained gunners to aim for the spar. The Alliance developed reinforced variants eventually, but originals stayed in service for decades because the Alliance couldn't afford to be picky. Retiring on a Nebulon B is like living in a house where the staircase is a load-bearing wall and everyone in town knows which brick to pull. The next ship is structurally fine, the problem is everything else about it. Number 4. Here's a sentence nobody has ever said. I'd love to retire inside an abandoned droid control ship. And yet the Lucrehulk is technically one of the most spacious vessels in the entire Star Wars galaxy. Originally designed as commercial cargo haulers by Horst Kessel Drive, these massive ring-shaped ships were converted into battleships by the Trade Federation before the Clone Wars. After the war, hundreds were left derelict, drifting through space or parked in shipbreaking yards. The interior volume is staggering, over 3 kilometers in diameter with enough hangar and cargo space to house entire droid armies. In theory, you'd have more room than you could ever explore. In practice, you'd be wandering through kilometers of empty echoing corridors designed for droids, not people. The habitable crew sections are a tiny fraction of the overall ship, clustered around the bridge sphere. Everything else is cavernous, dark industrial space with no windows, no natural light, and the lingering ghosts of a few million deactivated battle droids. Comfort is a paradox. Endless space, but almost none of it is livable. Privacy is technically infinite because you could wander for days without seeing another soul, which sounds liberating until you realize how deeply unsettling that actually is. Safety is surprisingly high if systems are operational, since Lucrehulks carry massive quad-turbo laser batteries. Reliability is the catch. These ships require enormous crews or sophisticated automation to maintain, and a single retiree isn't keeping 3 kilometers of warship functional. The Legends lore adds a creepy layer. After the Clone Wars, several Lucrehulks were discovered in deep space with their droid armies still partially active, running on degraded programming. Imagine retiring into your spacious new home only to discover a few thousand B-1 battle droids still shuffling around the lower decks on corrupted patrol routines. Living here is like retiring into an abandoned aircraft carrier that's also haunted by malfunctioning robots. Number 3. The Imperial Star Destroyer is the most iconic warship in science fiction, and on the surface, it seems like a reasonable place to live. It's enormous at 1,600 meters long, carries over 37,000 crew, and has medical bays, mess halls, officer quarters, and enough infrastructure to function as a small city. So why is it this high on the list? Because living on a Star Destroyer isn't retirement, it's institutionalization. Every square meter is designed around military efficiency and authoritarian control. Identical gray Durasteel corridors, harsh fluorescent lighting. Crew quarters are standardized cells barely larger than a prison bunk, and even officer quarters are Spartan by civilian standards. No recreational areas, no green spaces, no windows in crew sections. The ambient soundscape is a constant low hum of reactor output mixed with boot steps on metal flooring. It's a military barracks, the size of a small town, with all the warmth of one. Comfort is a 3, functional but soulless. Privacy is minimal for enlisted and moderate officers, but everything is monitored. Safety from external threats is outstanding, but internal safety is another story. Unrailed catwalks over reactor shafts, exposed power conduits in crew corridors. In canon supplemental material from the Imperial Handbook, crew morale was notoriously low. Shifts were grueling, discipline brutal, and the psychological effect of months in identical corridors with no natural light was documented as a genuine problem even by Imperial standards. Retiring here is like living in the world's largest government office building, except you can never leave and there are no windows. The next entry takes everything wrong with a Star Destroyer and multiplies it by 10. Number 2. If the Imperial Star Destroyer is an oppressive government building, the Super Star Destroyer is an oppressive government city. The Executor-class dreadnought stretches 19 kilometers from bow to stern, carries a crew of over 280,000, and represents the absolute peak of Imperial excess and intimidation. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Walking from one end to another would take hours. Internal transit systems exist, but they're designed for military logistics, not convenience. The crew quarters are the same soul-crushing Imperial standard, just multiplied across a vessel so large you could live aboard for years and never see the same corridor twice. Which sounds interesting until you realize every one of those corridors looks exactly the same. You could disappear into sections no one visits for months, but every major area is under Imperial surveillance. In Legends, the Executor class had internal politics that functioned almost like a small totalitarian state. Crew in remote sections sometimes went weeks without contact from command. Some areas were so infrequently maintained they developed micro-ecosystems of vermin and decay. You're not retiring on a ship, you're retiring into a dystopian city-state that happens to be flying through space. And we know exactly how the Executor ended. A single A-Wing crashing into the bridge at the Battle of Endor, sending 19 kilometers of warship plummeting into the Death Star. That's the kind of reliability you're betting your retirement on. Living here is like the most aggressively overbuilt gated community in history, where everything is gray, the HOA is the Empire, and one bad day means the whole neighborhood crashes into an exploding moon. But we haven't reached number 1. Imagine a ship so infamous it was destroyed twice, taking millions with it each time. Number 1. The absolute worst place in the galaxy to retire, and it shouldn't even be close. The first Death Star was approximately 120 to 160 kilometers in diameter, depending on the source. with more recent canon material favoring the lower figure. The second was significantly larger, estimated at over 200 kilometers across. Both were fully operational battle stations housing millions of Imperial personnel, support staff, and the largest turbo laser ever constructed. On paper, the sheer scale means room for everyone. In practice, every square meter was dedicated to one purpose: destruction. The daily experience of living aboard the Death Star would be institutional misery on a scale that makes a Star Destroyer look cozy. The internal layout is a maze of identical corridors, massive hangar bays, weapons systems, power conduits, and military infrastructure. Crew quarters are standard Imperial minimalist design, packed into residual blocks that feel more like brutalist housing project than a home. There are reportedly recreational areas and cantinas buried deep in the station, but accessing them requires navigating a bureaucratic military structure designed to keep people in their assigned sections. No windows anywhere near crew areas. The ambient noise is a deep constant thrum from the hypermatter reactor at the station's core, a sound you'd never escape no matter where you went. Comfort is a 1. You're living in the galaxy's largest weapon. Privacy is non-existent because Imperial security aboard the Death Star was among the tightest in the Empire, with surveillance, checkpoints, and loyalty monitoring at every level. Safety is the ultimate cruel joke. The Death Star can destroy entire planets, making it the most powerful offensive weapon in galactic history, yet it was destroyed both times it was built. The first fell to a single proton torpedo through an exhaust port. The second was destroyed while still under construction when the Rebel fleet exploited its incomplete superstructure. You're retiring inside the galaxy's biggest target. In Legends, the novel Death Star by Michael Reeves and Steve Perry described the station's culture as oppressively hierarchical, paranoid, and dehumanizing. Even high-ranking officers reported a persistent sense of unease, a feeling that something about the station was fundamentally wrong, an unnatural concentration of military power that attracted trouble like a magnet. In canon, the Catalyst novel by James Luceno details how the station's construction was built on lies, exploitation, and weaponized kyber crystals, filling the very walls with a kind of dark resonance. Retiring on the Death Star is like living inside a nuclear warhead the size of a city, governed by a totalitarian regime, with the entire galaxy actively trying to blow you up. You wouldn't last a year. If you enjoyed this, click the link in the description to check out our previous video on the 10 most dangerous jobs in the Star Wars galaxy. Trust me, it's worth your time. There you have it, 10 iconic Star Wars ships, and not one would give you a peaceful retirement. From the Falcon's constant breakdowns to the Death Star's catastrophic track record, the galaxy far, far away is spectacularly bad at designing comfortable places to live. Now I want to hear from you. Which ship would you still risk retiring in, and which is an absolute deal breaker? Drop your answer in the comments. I know this ranking is going to start debates, and I'm here for every one of them. Until next time, may the Force be with you, and may your retirement be better than anything the galaxy has to offer.